Okay, next on the hit parade, does everybody know who Robin Voss is? Okay. This is Robin Voss speaking to the editorial board of the Wisconsin State Journal. And he's talking about education. Okay, so same drill. Have you seen this, Penny?
I've seen Robin.
Oh, don't know how you do it. Okay.
How big would you like to see that get? Sort of the private school choice vouchers, yeah.
Well, I'd like to say that's like Milwaukee, yeah. I mean, I'd like to say my ultimate preference would be to have parents deciding wherever they want to all across the state with no cap. You know, if there's any parent around the state who says, look, I've looked at the report card, I know that a private school does a better job than the public school my kids would go to. They can't open enroll anywhere else. They can't get out. Well, I think they should be able to take that voucher and choose something better for their families, because it goes right back to my first point. If I want people to not be dependent on government, they need to have the
They cut off kind of the best part there, but you get the idea. Here's what's really interesting. As somebody who does a lot of education research, my first response to that wants to be that voucher schools don't do better than public schools. Was that everybody's first response? So so guess what happens? When you say voucher school, you're reinforcing the conservative frame. Because what's a voucher? Voucher isn't something bad. It's free. It's something you deserve. We're giving it to you. So, yeah. So the education thing is hard because the conservative privatization movement started messaging it brilliantly. What did they make school privatization all about? Spot on. Whose choice? Well, yes, we'll get to that too. We'll get to that too. Yeah, the women's health thing is really good. Okay, choice. Whose choice? Parents. Who is the head of the family in the conservative frame? The father. Who has the ultimate authority in the family? The father. The father does. Right? Also in the conservative frame, you have the hierarchy, men above women, parents above children. Father knows best. That's why it's so hard to counter this frame. Most of you just instinctively understand this idea, father knows best. Well, of course, parents know what's best for their kids. Do they? So here's what I want. We talked about this whole idea of systemic causation, right? So we know that people don't make decisions rationally. Right? What do people make decisions based on? Emotion, personal bias, cultural bias, social bias. Right? We have an entire education system built on a false premise that people will make a responsible choice. Wow. So this Milwaukee study that we did on habitual truancy report card scores, we found out that we could explain the differences in report card scores from school to school, 72% by the difference in habitual truancy from school to school in Milwaukee. Every school in Milwaukee. Public, charter, private, right? And it didn't matter what type of school it was. Every school saw the same effect of habitual truancy. Except guess what? The private charter schools had significantly lower truancy rates. And when we dug into the data further, why was it? Because they were being selective. They're selecting out students that have a proclivity for being more truant. So they were So on their face, the report card scores looked higher because they're enrolling kids that go to school more. Right? And why is that? Because the parents who choose private charter schools are higher educated, make more money, and have kids that would succeed in school no matter what. Right? We have an entire system based on a false premise. That's what we need to be saying. We need to be saying that public subsidies for private education are destroying public education.
You're talking a lot of facts. I'm not hearing values.
Oh, sure.
I can talk value.
Public,
Talk
right.
values.
Vouchers,
Well,
steal
I'm
from
pointing out
education.
I'm pointing out the systemic
for another.
I'm pointing out the systemic nature of education, right? Schools aren't failing because of bad teachers, right? You have schools that are struggling because communities are struggling, because we have a second school system that's publicly funded, that are private schools that are stealing money from public education. They are destroying public education, right? I'm pointing out the systemic nature. So now let's talk about values.
Can you go back and repeat that phrase?
Oh, sure.
That we're trying to write down?
Oh, I do have it up here in a second, too. No, when I change the slide, you'll see it. But it's basically this idea that publicly subsidized private schools are destroying public education. Right? They take money from public education. They skim students from public education and leave other students behind. So, again, pointing out systemic causation. Yep.
I'm afraid you're guilty of repeating the conservative line, which is that schools are failing. And in fact, very few fail, but that's the thing we're constantly having to defend against. Well, schools are failing because of this, not because of that.
Right.
Who says they're failing to begin with?
I agree with that. When you're drawing, the systemic line, you can undermine what your opponent is saying to some extent. Now, I wouldn't say, in terms of trying to counter what Robin Voss said, I wouldn't, because he said failing schools. I wouldn't use it with him. Well, we're going to do that right now.
Okay.
I kind of digress to pointing out the systemic causation and how that applies, because that's important. But so more importantly, so he talked about choice, right? But what else more importantly, what did he say about government?
Fosters dependency.
Yes.
So when I went to public school, I was learning to be dependent on the government.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Right, that's what he's saying.
I'm getting an education.
And that's immoral in the conservative frame, right? Public ed equals government, which is immoral. Because you're not self-reliant. Wow. That's why they want to destroy public education.
Yeah. Part of what kind of going on what was said before, when you hear the statement, your school is above state average. Do you ever think about that? Half the schools are going to be below state average. They can't all be above state average.
Here's what's more disturbing. Here's what's more disturbing about that. This goes really deeper into the whole education topic, and here's how dominant the conservative frame of education has become. Why do we put so much weight on test scores? What do test scores show?
Yeah.
No.
No, that some kids learn how to test.
No.
And teachers teach for the test.
No. Socioeconomic status. Right? We have yet to come up with a test that doesn't correlate directly with socioeconomic status. I could show you scatter plot after scatter plot with this being test score and this being pre-reduced lunch rate, right? And it's this. The higher the free reduced lunch rate, the lower the test score. But here's why. Because the conservative frame is all about accountability. Right? And why do you need accountability? To punish. Right? If schools get low test scores, they should be closed. Those teachers should be fired. Those students should fail.
We should go to private schools.
Yes. Do you get it?
Yeah.
When we accept the idea of test scores as being the benchmark for student success, we accept the conservative frame. That's how powerful framing is. Right? What is education for? So this is what is progressives? What is education for?
To get to the top, make the
No.
most money.
No. Is education to get a job?
No. Make a strong community.
Make a strong community. Community, what else?
Lead a fulfilling life.
Lead a fulfilling life. How about
Opportunity.
opportunity and freedom to pursue a meaningful life?
And how to accept responsibility for others.
Yes. Opportunity and freedom. Responsibility for others. Empathy. Here's one. If you don't have public education, how do your kids even know what is possibly meaningful?
You read the Bible.
If you're in a private school that has a narrow curriculum, what opportunities are those kids missing because they're not in a public school that has a broad curriculum?
The opportunity to question and
The ability to critical think.
Absolutely. All these things, these are things you need to be talking about. Right? So when you hear this idea of choice and how you want less people relying on government, right, you need to counter with things like, but look, education gives every child the opportunity and freedom to know what's meaningful. But you can start having an influence on the message. Again, repeating, see, when you activate this in people's brains, it inhibits this. You can't think of both. You can't accept both. Your brain doesn't allow it. So what are you doing? You're forcing people to make a moral decision. And I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, people will choose empathy and community. You know why? This is the coolest thing. You're all hardwired for empathy. It's in your brains. We've evolved to be empathetic creatures. There's these things called mirror neurons in your brain. So if you spill a cup of coffee on your hand, and you go, "Oh, that hurt," the same mirror neurons fire in my brain watching her burn herself as what she experiences. Moreover, our brains can process motion and action the same way. Right? So if I watch somebody peel and eat a banana, my brain experiences the exact same thing. The same neurons fire watching that action as doing it. We're hardwired for empathy. That's why this is so important. Right? What person doesn't believe in the golden rule? So, yep.
one reason they may not accept critical thinking is because father knows best. And I'm just big father.
Yeah. Oh, so she said one reason they won't accept critical thinking is because they believe father knows best, right? But you should still say it. Yeah. Because remember, this is about literally changing brains. Right? Brains can be changed. You can change your behavior. You can modify your behavior neurally, cognitively. That's what this is about. And it takes repetition. It takes, over and over. So I had some notes that a lot of you touched on, right? So public schools provide opportunity and freedom for all children to learn necessary skills and knowledge. I mean, you can shorten this up, opportunity and freedom for all children This is really true. Without public education, there's no democracy. There's no freedom. There's no freedom to know. There's no freedom to understand, to question, to experience. Responsibility is very, very powerful value. So is community. People want to be part of a prosperous community. Nobody wants to live on, 38th and Milwaukee. People want to live in a prosperous community. And we have a responsibility to invest in our future. How do we do that? Public education. This one actually came out of a session we did in Milwaukee late last year. Public schools are the heart of the community. Just say that over and over.
What exactly does that mean, though, with the heart of the community?
What does that make you feel?
What exactly is community? How do you emphasize what you're really trying to say in community?
It's the neighborhood, the street you live on, the neighborhood you live in, the city you live in, the state you live in, the nation. I mean, community can mean just the people in this room, or it can mean, see, you're trying to get at a very core level with people. I mean, you're trying to hit them in their gut. And when you express that public schools are the heart of the community, that's something people will understand. You're creating a metaphor. Metaphors our entire lives are filled with metaphor. Right? Mathematics is metaphorical.
And all of these statements are based on the premise that voucher schools are taking funds away and destroying public schools. That's the fact that lots of people don't know. And so what you're suggesting is you talk about these things and then say, well, that's great, education, we need to have choice. And you say, but voucher schools are ripping this apart.
Right, and you don't say voucher schools. You say, and again, we don't have our little catchphrase, but you could say, subsidized private schools. Right? Conservatives hate subsidies, right? Right? So use that against them. Taxpayer funded, taxpayer subsidized private schools, right? You could, you could say something simple like, we have a responsibility to invest in our future, public schools are heart of the community, blah, blah, blah. You frame the debate. When somebody talks about choice, then you turn around and you just say, well, look, those taxpayer subsidized private schools are destroying public education. Now, right, because you stated the why. This is the why. This is why it's important. Okay, the what, always the why first, then the what. The why is public schools are the heart of the community. Without public schools, we wouldn't have any democracy. Kids wouldn't be free to learn without the public schools. Right? Then hit them with the what. They're destroying public education because they're stealing money from schools. And again, very simply, private prosperity is not possible without the public. Right? It can come back to that. Public education. Right? Senator Johnson, don't you have people that work for you that were educated in the Oshkosh public schools? Why do you want to destroy public education? Wow, ask him that. There are people working for you, Senator Johnson, who attended Oshkosh public schools, and they're creating profit for you. Do you want to destroy public education? Why do you want to do that?
At the University of Wisconsin.
Well, it's the same, right?
You think, I'm not destroying public education. I'm giving parents an opportunity to get a better education for their children. So I can make more money.
No, he wouldn't say. He would say, I want to give parents a choice. He would say that. But you don't have to answer that. You don't have to respond. See, you don't have to respond to everything they say in their frame, right? Really good conservatives, they never answer a question that's not in the frame that they don't want to address it in. they change the frame. So you have to change the frame. You have to change the frame from school choice to private prosperity, possible the public education provides freedom and opportunity for every child, not selective, et cetera, right? So the idea is that you work on these bullet points and these concepts so that they become familiar to you, so that when you engage with somebody or you are speaking in public, it becomes second nature. And I guarantee you, it will become second nature because you all understand this, right? You all get this at a very basic level. You just have to verbalize it.